Hey guys, welcome back to part two. And as you all know, old Bad Bunny's under a lot of scrutiny on this channel, that's for sure. A couple of weeks back, I'm going to say off the top of my head, maybe a month or 6 weeks ago. If you haven't seen our also a first show we actually did on Bad Bunny, be good to check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But yay, without any further ado, Tadam, Madame, how are
No.
you?
Doing well.
In the last half an hour, has anything changed?
No, but I think we should, in the start of this, we should start address that question you asked me right beforehand behind. I think that would be a good place to start after prayer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's open in prayer, Jess.
All right. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for uh, all that you do, for the sunshine, for the light that you carry and lift our burdens that are heavy on our heart. And we just praise you for that. We ask that you would bless our internet, bless our airwaves, bless our technology and our equipment, and all who are in our audience today. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jessie.
Yeah.
And thank you, all you beautiful humans, for joining us. And even those who aren't humans, and I mean dogs and cats and birds and things, and any kind of other non humans as well. Welcome. I hope you enjoy. Anyway, we were just chatting offhand, and I actually asked you, Jess, a question which often comes up. Now, as I say before, I sort of often take for granted that because you've been a guest on this channel pretty much from the beginning, that everyone knows you. So we
Right.
don't go through the whole rigmarole of who you are, what you are, where you come from. I kind of assume, but every now and again questions come up, and I think it's good to address them. One of the questions that comes up a lot, and I think this might also come from the naysayers, so we're going
Mhm.
to address it, is how, if you left the system at the age of 10, you are able to retain the knowledge and information that you do. I think I understand why, but I'd like to, and I try often as best as what I can to answer, but often I just
Yeah.
ignore those types of questions nowadays. So
So,
you can maybe
threefold
explain.
answer. The first is that, children in the system, the hierarchy children are trained uh, from the age of 4.5 to 10. By the time they're 10, they're fully trained to step into their position. So I was fully trained for my position by age 10. The second part of that, and this is more towards the naysayers, and specific to the word, how can I retain it all? It was my job to know this information. But the other thing is they like to push things, claiming people are mind controlled and that people have handlers, which I've addressed those before, that I am neither of those things. So, the Lord has given me the ability to cope through. And it wasn't just of my own accord. The Lord walked with me through that. And, I had to live these things. I had to live it. The third part of that is that, everything that I share is out of the things that I learned. Um, the Brotherhood and the sovereign military, they have their own language. It's a hidden language, a silent language, many times, with keys and symbols and things that, you know, the average person is not taught because they're hiding the true meanings. And when we think of that language, we have to think of it in layers. There's different layers to it. So a person who's at the very bottom of the system or low end, they're only going to know one or two layers, and that's going to revolve specifically around, their connection to the system or their position. They won't know everything. They only will know what's necessary for them to know. If they want more knowledge, they're going to have to advance in their degrees and they're going to have to, earn that knowledge. What you are getting is top of the system. You are getting everything, and it's taken us a long time to be bringing it all forth. But, basically, I've been teaching you guys to read this hidden language. And, once you learn it, once you learn how to read, you see it everywhere, and you hear. It's like, now when we see current things, you know, that's they're communicating right now, current time, because I understand that language. I pick up what they're doing. And that's what we bring forward in these decodes. So,
And I think you've also mentioned something really important, which again will come up every so often again, mainly with the naysayers, is how come you are still alive when you are imparting this information? And again, and I honestly will account for this in many of my own personal experiences and others that I know. When you've learned, or when you put faith over fear, I don't know how, whether you learn, when you are able to put faith over fear,
right,
you are protected by the highest God that there is.
I
I
mean,
don't know
he's
how
given
else to
me
put it.
something to do. He's told me to go forward and give my testimony in full, and that's what is unfolding. He's allowing me to do exactly what he's called me to do.
Exactly. And that's when you are divinely protected by nature, by the very nature of doing that. You protect that because you are protected because you are imparting sacred information, which is your life's purpose.
Anointed and appointed to it are good words.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, because again, as I say, every so often, these questions or accusations, comments come up. And I just like to make that clear, because I think all the time as well, we have new viewers and people do question that, because mostly, and again, I want to make it very clear that it doesn't mean that if someone has passed away or had their life taken from them, that they are now not doing God's work, because that also comes up. It amazes me how much stuff comes up. That's not like that. The way I see that is that God has given each and every one of us a purpose, and we are anointed to do what we are meant to do. And if that person's contract with God and on this timeline is over, then they will be called back. So when it's time for you to be called, you will be called, and no one is ever going to change that or stop that. But I see a lot of judgment around that often, and I think it's very dangerous for us to be delving into topics like that when we throw judgment and question stuff like that. We need to be careful about how we use our words. We really do.
We do, and he's not the God of the dead. He is the God of the living. And, that's what we have in afterlife is we have life, abundant life. And so it's not a negative thing unless you have, absolutely rejected God and, embraced evil, then, you will have that life. So, all who believe.
Absolutely.
All who believe in him.
Indeed. And on that beautiful note, let's get into it.
All right, we'll tackle this beast.
There's that young guy, sorry, what's his name? Sloan, I think. And he kind of he was always, let's get into it. I thought, that sounds so good. So we getting into it. I'm quoting his phrase from now on when I remember.
Yeah. And again, I really encourage you, go back, watch our earlier episode if you missed that. A lot of these 2 episodes and our 2 next week are really going to tie in together, and we're going to see them tying into even more Catholic things. So we'll say Jesuit Catholic things, but there are good Catholic people, but it is not my belief that, or I'll just say there are some that are not. Let's go there.
Yeah.
So let's get into Bad Bunny and his, declarations. Again, kind of starting from last time, we're going to get into you know, the uniforms, the clothes they wear. We're going to look at the imagery, the things that are displayed. We know for people who are curious about it, I believe on Twitter, I'm not sure if it was on Truth Social or other places, but I saw it on Twitter. It looked like our president's son put up the lyrics to Bad Bunny's song, which if you look those up, they are very, graphically sexual. Um, and, he's doing this at a Super Bowl, which is just dishonoring, I feel, in every way, displaying all this imagery. But, he's not in it just for the show. He's making a declaration. It's my full belief that he has taken a new position, that he's elevated himself in his degrees of illumination. And I think we're seeing him displaying what he's going to be over, which we're going to get into, what his, specialties are going to be, what kind of training is he going to be doing, and his areas of focus around the world. It's my full belief that's going to be in connection with Lady Gaga, which we covered more of what I felt were her declarations in the last show. So I encourage you to see that, to kind of see some of the interconnections. But let's go ahead and start with the first pictures here. So, this isn't the starting scene, but I want to point out here, we see a lot of this imagery that looks Latino. We see the sugar cane. There's some scenes where they've got bananas too, but I believe this is sugar cane. And, and so everything's going to kind of revolve and is situated in this maze of sugar cane. And sugar cane is a sexual euphemism. You have cane representing slang for male genitalia, but also it can represent the sexual act, which they're going to call raising cane, and that's about raising sexual energy. Now, we know that in their sex magic, that's what they're doing. They're opening spiritual gates, they're accessing portals, they're accessing spiritual dimensions, and they're doing that through the use of children and sexual magic. That sexual magic is going to not only include sex with children, but it's going to include, sexual activities with demons and with beasts at time. So that's something to keep in mind as we look through this. Go ahead to the next one there. So we start off his shirt there. You can't see it too well here, but the front and the back, it's got a number 64 on it. Now, there were some things going out online that were saying it represented his mother, who's passed away, and the year of her birth. So, in light of that theme, we know we've saw a lot with the Grammys, with the necromancy and the dead. Why is he wearing, why is the birth year of his dead mother so important to him? I don't think it is. I think this is a way that he's displaying his degrees. And, when you look at degrees, you have your 15, your 30, your 60, your 90, your 180, and your 360. So, you read the first part in the Brotherhood, his degrees would be 60. Now, if there's a 3, a 5, or a 7 as a second number, that dictates that he's, part of the sovereign military, and either specifically a knight at a number 3, a supreme preceptor overseeing other knights at a level or at a number 5, or a quadrant leader with a number 7. But we don't see the odd numbers. Instead, we see even numbers. And there is a reason for that. That's going to connect to your councils and special groups. Your special councils will all be known as odd numbers, but as members are working through degrees or attaining higher positions, such as councilmen, it's common for you to see even numbers as that second number. So it just means he's continuing on. He plans to, go further. His next stop will be, around that 90 degrees. So keep going, if you don't mind, to the next picture. Yeah, so we see that with, go ahead to the next one. He's wearing that shirt. Well, then we begin to see all these scenes with different vendors. And I think this is very specific. We know at the Super Bowl, traditionally, there's a lot of child movement that happens at the events themselves, as well as areas around the event. And I think that this is setting up Code, their creative way of showing all of those who are part of the system, who are there to engage in pedophilia, where things are going to be. And you'll see kind of triggers, little subtle things that are going to kind of set up that as people are showing up at places, they're going to look for certain things. They're going to know who to approach. They're going to know kind of the symbols to look for. Everything's going to kind of give them a sign, a token, a symbol of some sort into how to get in to the next meeting, or where everything's going to be based on what they're looking for. And again, they're trained when they see these symbols or images, they understand, oh, okay, we've got an umbrella. Well, how many of us are fully aware of the Umbrella Club? How many of us have been to Jesuit Catholic churches and sitting in the sanctuary and we see a umbrella with all of the folds down that's red and white, and understand what that means? You get your umbrellas connected to the Jesuits, but also to you've got an upper class of them connected to some government offices and official areas, the Order of the Umbrella. But usually when it's the Order of Umbrella, you'll directly see the white and the the white and the red umbrella. When it's just the red and stuff, it could be white, it could be red, it could be black. That's going to go to your base Knights of Malta. And you get cream, coconut cream being something that is connected to sexual terms. You get the coconut milk. Many of us, have seen things in the ads with the milk mustaches. I will say this disclaimer before I follow it with other things. I am not speaking about our, I'll say DJT and the little post he put up with a milk mustache. He is not a part of this. I believe it was very specific. I believe he was directly calling out those who are engaged in this form of sexual things when he made that post. So I will put that disclaimer out. But your coconut and coconut milk and milk mustaches, you get a group of your mustache club, which is usually connected to law enforcement. You get a darker side of that, and there's going to be maybe different layers. I mean, think about how you open fruit like that, whether it's coconuts, whether it's the cactuses that are very similar, or other fruits that are similar to that. You get a concept of the cracking open of the fruit in order to get the fluid inside. So that's the darker side. The lighter side, it's kind of a reference to, just sexual things, oral sex. So that's the short and the simple of that. Go ahead to the next one. This one just shows, you get a lot of that old look. You'd get a lot of the brotherhood meeting in clubs, going on vacations together, meeting in resorts, different hotels, and all gathering together to play games and, smoke their cigars, look like they're hanging out. So, I think this is the full, image of the boys' club. And I think that there's a specific area near there where, where they would have a meeting and they're going to have an event and, they're going to be providing sexual things at that for those who are older, more of kind of like your specialty escort services and, um, things that they're going to get through another facility, whether that's a hotel, a club, things like that. And so you'll see the style, they tell you what to wear, what to show up, all of that helps them identify as you come into that place or that room. You're going to know where you're going, what to expect, what the package deal is. So these can be ways that they display the package deal, what's needed to get in, and how you know who to look for to get into that deal. Go ahead to the next one. This one, you get the image of the salons. Salons is one of the largest forms of movement of children right now in our country. You get a lot both through the African American, the Latino, as well as the Asian salons, both for hair and nails. And, so notice he passes the ball or sets the ball on the table. And you get the white glove imagery in that. And I think literally it's like an offering, like the glove set on the table is the code there, that, they're going to put their hand or the glove on the table, and then that's how they'll know who to look for and what's there. So I think, again, it's just showing people whether it's in the area or whether they have direct vending stalls there at the event. It could be both, but they're showing the people in the area, because as people are sitting and they're watching this event, they're seeing this halftime show, as well as, you got people in the area who are going to be watching it on TV and everything. And so they're going to be seeing all these codes going out, and they're going to understand what that means. Go ahead to the next one. So here we see the bricks, which you get in masonry. They're known as builders. And it's interesting that they've got the, female builders. Who knows what the female builders are called? You get your priestesses, your Eastern Star, you get your Masonic lodges. And I think that that's what this was representing, is that you're going to have things happening also at the local Masonic lodges and other specific buildings that are identified as Masonic in the area. And you do get some, I'll just say, some indirect sexual things with this, which is why I think he does the certain posture. Your builders also are those that could be diggers as well. And notice how his hands are almost like crossed, like you see the mummies or the dead. So there could be some things with that would be a part of what the people would get with that package deal, that, that there's going to be sacrifice, that, bricks piled up is also another way they could display an altar. So that might be where, they were holding the rituals and the sacrifices. So Go ahead to the next one. You start to see a lot with the reaching out and the shaking of some hands and the grabbing of product even briefly. And that's not, that's not by accident. I've actually seen this many, many times in public, where especially like down streets, where you have groups of stores that in smaller downtowns where they have like a lot of connection to, your Masons are owning the buildings, or your Oddfellows are owning the buildings. You'll have a Catholic church nearby, and you'll see like the kind of a mix of retail, high-end business, or businesses, like whether that's banks, whether that's real estate offices. You get like this mix in those areas, and you'll see the men out on the streets during lunchtime. And what you'll see is these store owners will go out, and stand outside of the front of the store, and they'll greet people as they come in. And if you ever see that, just step back and watch, and you'll see that you'll see like some, they'll just give a general handshake, and others you'll see they give like a, brotherhood handshake, and they'll all of a sudden pull in and give a big hug, and they'll kind of talk for a minute. They're usually telling each other where to go for things. And then you'll see the men that they hug, like they'll keep walking, and then all of a sudden they'll turn down an alley or something. And I've seen, even as they've like trafficked young girls, like I saw all the girls lined up on the street, and then they just disappeared down this alley through a back door. And the doors were locked. There was no way to get in there. I reported that, but I don't think anything was done with it. But this can be a way that they communicate. So sometimes they'll do things where they're showing the symbols. They'll show you what to ask for the specific things that you want to get into. So I think that that's what this one was displaying. Go ahead to the next one. This one as well, like notice the posture. Notice he takes just a little bit, like almost like he's taken just a little taste. And then you have it at the taco stand, which taco is a huge, huge way. That's a term that they use for the movement of children. You get all sorts of different forms, and, it can be both male and female. Usually the taco will be more female, but it can be both, and can refer both to, anal or oral sex. And, it's concerning with just the little taste. Is it about the age of the children? What is that about, So that's scary. But I think that this is what they're communicating. Go ahead to the next one. Boxing, you get a huge, amount of movement of children through different sports and sports events. It would be curious to see what other sports events or what gyms or clubs that have a focus on boxing or there around the Super Bowl. I think that would indicate, either a location or an event where they're going to be having things. It could be, in the near future as well. You also have the underground games, which can happen. And that might be why we see the red and the blue, even though those are common colors in boxing for gloves and stuff. But we know, magically you get the fire and the water magic. So, and you see two brothers fighting, or two males. So that could be significant in what is being offered as well. You do get, competitions where those in the sovereign military are going to be fighting each other, and they can earn money, they can earn all sorts of rewards for doing that in the sovereign military, and get prestige or honor or advancement. And they'll get a mix of, there being a competition, a challenge, plus advancing in their specialties or their skills, as well as the sexual exploitation. So, it could be signifying where they're doing that around this event, and what they're doing with that. I'd be curious if he begins hosting or being a part of a lot of these competitions as well, because I believe he is declaring his efforts and what he will be focusing on. Go ahead to the next one.
I just want to ask you here, when you talk about the underground games, can you maybe, I know we've spoken briefly about that before, but maybe you could expand just a little bit on that, because it looks very much like that to me, on what that is.
Yeah, so you'll have games. They can include obstacle courses, but it can be for the training of the hierarchy children. They will be connected to specific things, which they'll have, skills that they're going to be learning, things that they're going to practice. It's both physical and spiritual. So this is often a way that they would do it, is having kids in, activities or places where it looks like the kids are involved in those activities. But then they have, the entire club or games are underground. You'll see this in the prisons, where they'll have these type of competitions. You'll see it in connection, like I've talked about, how like when all of a sudden we see in Rome, like millions of children showing up to pray for other children. When you see things like that, often that's an indicator that those games are going on. You also have the fight clubs and those different types of competitions where you'll have even, people who are considered normal, not necessarily system, they'll come in through gangs or other, friend invites or things into these competitions. And it can be used as scouting and recruiting to try to draw people into the system if, they weren't necessarily brought up in it. This one you get, the merchant shop, your jewelry, your watches, which some of these things we broke down in other shows. With your jewelry, a big thing is going to be diamonds, which are used in sex magic. You also get white gold, which is connected to Druidism, and eternal life. You get the watches, which deal with astral projection and time in the spirit world. So this can be, talking about more of the, what we're going to call the high-end sex magic. And, they're going to have that available as well. And they just kind of show you, who to look for, what to look for, or where things are going to be happening. I'm curious if he's going to get into that type of thing. You will probably see more with him coming out with different jewelry companies or specific, products that are going to revolve around those we see here, the diamonds, the gold, and the watches. Go ahead to the next one. And notice the whole time he's dressed in white, which is their main color to represent Lucifer, the great white light. This was kind of the start. We see, minus the punctuation mark, you got 3 symbols. I think it's meant to, be the SEX word. But you see, the women, the cheerleaders dancing, you see the shoes they're wearing. Shoes can be, and a clothing attire can all be ways that they're going to draw people in. It could just be their uniforms, but I don't think so. And you've got him standing on top of a little shack. The shack is interesting because this actually is the starting scene, and you see him up there on top. Then he ends up in the shack, and it almost looks like a mix between a party and a family home. And you have the symbology, like this is the only place where they really zoom in on that number on his shirt with the 64. So, in our decodes, we've talked about how archways, when you have three of them, they represent a northern wall. And then along the western wall underground is where the altar's going to be. Um, you know, so you have a mix of, things that are indicating that there's an altar, that there's going to be rituals. You've got the pink, which goes back to the movement of children, the abductions. And then you have, that look of the feel for the necromancy, the home environment. Is there a medium or a psychic shop nearby that's going to resemble that, where they're meeting below ground? The other thing that just keeps coming to my mind with that image is the little love shacks. Are there areas around there where they've got the little love shacks? So, is there underground there? And that's where the altar is. So there can be, layers in this as to what exactly, they're communicating. Go ahead to the next one. This is where he's up on top of that building, and you specifically see the 6 women, and, the 6-pointed star in there, like, is with Solomonic magic, and that can be used, like, you have your pentacles, and then you also would have something very similar on the ground, but it would be a Solomonic star instead of a pentacle. And that's just going to dictate different forms of sacrifice as well as different forms of magic that they're going to use. So if this is what that's representing, if it's meant to, represent a 6-pointed star, it would be representing that they would be engaging in sacrifice and Solomonic Enochian magic at that place, that ritual underground. Go ahead to the next one. Here you see, like, this is where he falls through, and it looks like a old 80s family home. Notice that, they've even got the Catholic, you see in the background the statues of Mary, which are very significant because on March 12th and 19th, I'm going to get into how to decode those statues and how it connects to the sacrifices and the altars, and where the altars are and the times because that they're going to sacrifice when you see certain statues. So, this is just interesting. You kind of got that blend of the necromancy, the calling on or the representing of the dead, along with this kind of, older family Latino home that, imagery, but then you have the whole party scene outside, so it's almost like he's saying there's a residential area where, there's going to be doing things inside the homes and where another altar is. But go ahead to the next one. So right before this picture, they start to shift from that little pink house, and then you'll see the white truck there, and all of a sudden you see these men wheeling out these big tires. And then you see these 2 men come together, and what looks like the sexual imagery. And they will, their tailgate parties, we'll call it that just to be nice, but they literally will, you know, have vehicles, and people will have, engage in sexual activity like right out in the open. And we kind of, with that last decode that we saw from the Grammys, they used a vehicle too. And you saw the symbology for, the abracadabra. You saw um, the stars on the tires. We saw the stuff for oil, right? And so it's like, are they communicating things here? Tire rotation represents, changing sexual partners. Um, so you'll get these orgy like parties. Is that what they're communicating with this? Is that, where are the orgies? They're going to be out in the parking lots, or at the places where you go to get your tires rotated, or you'll just get all this different imagery that kind of gives you the locations of the places around where they're going to engage in these things. So we see that. And I think, it could be both, where they have, initially at the tailgate party there in the parking lot. And then also later, they're going to meet up afterwards at a mechanic place or something like that. And so it could be for multiple locations. You have to go to the first party in order to get into the second. And that's common. They use a lot of the underground nightclubs in that same way, where, people will come to an initial club or bar. And it's, once they go there, then they go up, they have to present the sign, the token, the word, and then they're given the details how to get into the underground club. So that's a common way that they operate. Go ahead to the next one. So this here is again just showing the tailgate party. From here, they go out into begin to get into the sugarcane fields. So go ahead to the next one. Yeah, go ahead past this one. And then, oh, I thought there was another. Okay, we'll do this one first. So, always look at who's around them, who's kind of being highlighted. You're looking at circle groups, people who are going to be pulled in. Sometimes you randomly can get individuals who have no clue. They're not part of it. They're brought in as a friend, and they're kind of the alibi for these individuals. But more than not, you're looking at their circle groups, how they operate together, who's all kind of going in. And, it's just kind of interesting. You have Pedro Pascal, Carol G, Jessica Alba, Cardi B, and then several more. And that includes Lady Gaga. So many of these people, they could be witches, warlocks, high priests, high priestesses, all under, you get your Beyonce and Lady Gaga. Lady Gaga being under Beyonce now. So, unless she's raising up into, I don't see her becoming a grand high priest right now, or priestess right now. I think she's probably more going towards high level sorceress, which would still put her under Beyonce, but that may change. Go ahead to the next one. So with these cane fields, we start to see flags that are represented. And again, you have to think humanitarian efforts. What is he declaring? What's his scope of operation? You get a lot of countries that are involved that are represented here, and you have to think which ones produce the most sugar cane. You've got countries like China, Thailand, Pakistan, Mexico, Colombia, Indonesia, Australia, but then you've got the countries that he's going to represent as well, that he's going to display. And, his operations could be anywhere that are high-level sugarcane populations. But think about this. We talked about, what does the sugar really mean? You're talking about other things connected to adrenochrome, things connected to bodily fluids and liquids, and the exploitation of children. So, what is he doing in these countries? That this is mass scale operations and distributions that he's taking over, and he's showing us how he's going to do it. What avenues he's going to use to do it in. So imagine, you see the salons, the salon imagery, the jeweler imagery, and, those are going to be the things that he's going to be mass producing underground and profiting off of. So we have to keep that in mind. Go ahead to the next one. They also had a wedding here, which was really interesting. Notice how, and I'm not saying that priests or pastors can't wear black. That's a common tux look or suit look, right? But the interesting thing is that, you have everybody in white except for the pastor, and then the men right behind, which are in red and blue. And, is this representing something more? Was it just a simple wedding, or, was there something more to this? Where you're getting the imagery being used, displaying, satanic weddings in a way. So it's hard to know with that. It could just have been just a regular wedding, but interesting. I would kind of look into this couple and the pastor marrying them, because, if there's more, then are they getting married in there because they have a buy-in into that production or distribution line in some way or not, with Bad Bunny. So I think that's worth, looking into at least. Go ahead to the next one. And good old Lady Gaga wearing blue and her big red flower there and blonde hair. You see, the same guys who are kind of behind the scenes for that wedding there. Now all of a sudden they present Lady Gaga, which is an interesting switch in all of this. But anyway, we know the big red flowers, the roses, wearing them like a lapel like that, often that's going to represent breeder programs. So it's interesting you've got that combination with the wedding there. What is she overseeing? We know the red also connects usually to the Rosicrucians, and they're working in operations in the area. So that could be part of this in what we're seeing. And we see her also wearing the red shoes in that. Again, not every time a woman wears red shoes is it representing something, but you get a connection with the Rosicrucians, different brotherhood orders, and the Red Shoe Club. And, we know how they get the red shoes. That also connects to the Jesuits. You also get a connection, all of your popes up until, I think, the last one, it was common for them to have red shoes. And that's a very specific thing. And again, it gets into the graphic killing and mutilation, the necromancy, and the necrophilia. Go ahead to the next one. Yeah, so you just see them dancing together, coming into alignment and agreement. And I think that, that's pretty much a, very strong declaration between these two, that she's behind, backing him, raising him up for his position, and he's coming into agreement. He's going to stand with her and hers. So, we know a lot of the military bases underground. What are things that they supply? What movement, what do they have go through there? This would be a very strategic move with her connections to certain places for that supply chain and everything. So mass amounts of money there. Go ahead to the next one. This again is just scenes from the wedding. You can get, cake walked. That was an old way. The Jesuit churches, as well as different fundraisers groups, they used to do a lot of the cake walks in the 80s. And, that could be a way to describe or a way to, whoever was winning would be the one kind of with the short end of the stick. But you also notice the ladders going up. That's a symbol used in Masonry. Again, this could be just a general wedding cake, but it may be part of the overall imagery showing the ascending into positions, the sexual exploitation that's going to happen in connection to your Masonic lodges. Go ahead to the next one. This one, I didn't see the fullness of this, but I guess there was a kid he tosses and gives the football to, like he's tossing the ball. I didn't necessarily feel or catch that this was necessarily meant to be a sexual thing. But what I will say is I have seen children used in the movement of other children. And the older kids will be used to kind of direct, to kind of lead. They can be a point person that people are going to. They also can be used to open doors or back way accesses. So he could be pointing out, the clothing, the glasses, the hairstyle, and the fact, that a child is carrying a football to indicate that those are the ones that you're looking for, that are going to open doors for you and take you where you need to go, or give you the help you need to find where you want to be. So they can use them as point people. And if this was something, that would be what I would feel it was. All right, go to the next one. Here you see, it could just be he was lifted up and his pants got disheveled, but we've talked about how that can be a code. That is used a lot in your Masonry, both in initiations and rituals, where you'll see they'll tuck in one pants leg and one will be pulled up. You can also get that with your bicycle orders, where they'll have, they'll do things with their pants legs to communicate certain things. So this very well could be, the signs, the things that they're giving for those orders, and where, as well as for recruiting those who are going to be initiated, where it will be, and things like that. All right, go ahead to the next one. Your good old liquor store ladies. notice the stripes, the colors. You see kind of also symbols, a flag on her, for her stall there. I think, again, he's taken a small drink, and I think, they're showing the codes, how to get in, who to go to, and stuff like that. So I think that one's pretty prominent. Go ahead to the next one. Now, this one, was interesting in a couple ways. A lot of people after this were putting up online that this was the little boy that, that the Dems accused of ICE harboring, because the dad was deported and they kept the child here in the United States. I can't verify that either way, but there was something I think even more significant that was in this, and that is his hand on top of the child's head. This is a very specific move in two ways, and it connects with the imagery we're seeing of all the sugar cane. One of your high areas connected to the cane, or the different, plants that are very similar to that you get, is your Vietnam, Laos, all those areas. In those cultures that are overseas, that can include Thailand in certain areas, for them, their ancient culture, the sign of the hand on top of the head was a sign of you taking somebody as a spouse. Like, it was their sign of marriage. It was their marriage contract. So this is very concerning that he's putting his hand on top of this child's head in that manner, and they would get down and look directly into the eyes. That was part of the contract. So for me, that's the concerning part I see is, is this a child he's choosing, and he's doing both the sign of covenant of being in a marriage contract, which then means he's going to raise up this child maybe to be a successor to him, but also maybe, to be engaged in with sexual magic. So I think that that's something to keep an eye on for sure. And if this child is the child that was detained by ICE, the concern is, how in the hell did this man get a hold of that child? And has he, purchased or bought that child, directly or indirectly? That's the concern. So, so there's a lot there. Go ahead to the next one. And then here we just see, again, we see some of the people connected to him. You see the banana fields kind of behind. Again, I think that, just all part of that imagery, representing places where they're going to be operating out of in connection to each other. All right, go ahead to the next one. Now, this was the most interesting, and go ahead. I think you had another picture of the, and this should scare us, especially when we think of rooms, when we think of them gathering. They're not going to be dancing on top of light poles. This isn't about, necessarily your nightclubs where they're going to have pole dancers. This is for your dark sexual activity. And this is how he's displaying it. And you get, places where they're going to be engaging in dark things. And you get a couple things with this. We'll start with the lighter stuff. They're going to provide rooms with sexual activity where they'll call it the hotline or the hot wire. And, it involves sexual arousal or innuendo. So, they're just gonna get to peek and see and, you know, things like that. But then if they get into the darker stuff, this gets into your erotic stimulation, electrical stimulation. And that's a form of your BDSM, where they're going to use low voltage electric stimulation on the body and, use that for arousal and stuff. So this can get really intense and bad. And because it's not just, they could have used a little TENS unit or something, but they don't. They're showing mass amounts of electricity. This also can get into your nuclear plants and, things that they're going to do to open gates at the nuclear energy level or through your energy companies. So there's a lot with that. Go ahead to the next one, or unless is that, yeah. So this is just kind of an end view. You kind of see the scene and notice even the way it looks. I think there were 4 of those energy poles, but just from this view, there may have been 3. That's interesting because you also get your imagery of the 3 crosses, which we know were at Golgotha. So is there more to this? When people elevate in the system, the grand high priest and priestesses, if they're doing sufferings, they will go through crucifixion. You can get crucifixion as well in sexual magic and things. So beyond the the electricity, which can be more than, I mean, you're dealing with mass amounts of energy that these people are using in magic, especially at those higher levels. That once they get to the 60 degrees, they're operating 60-degree arcs of energy in different light spectrums. That gets into your lightning, things like that. And they learn to use those things in their witchcraft battles. They learn to use weather and lightning, as a form of attack. So, all of that can be included in that, and kind of them showing layouts of the land where things are going to be, and where they're going to be holding stuff. It was interesting because that's at the 20-minute or the 20 mark line. The truck, I think, was at the 30 mark line. So I think that that's very strategically placed, but I think, was that the last one there? And that just shows like he had a bunch of different flags that were there. And I think that's going to go back to the countries, the places where he might be moving through. So the flags included Puerto Rico, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, Colombia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, and other Latin American areas. Now, when we think about that, we have to think how close those things are. You get a close connection to Florida, which we already brought out the concern there from the last show with Justin Timberlake, that you have underground there out of Florida areas. From there, you have a straight direct line underground. I believe even there, I've shown the railway, you get a railroad that literally goes down into where? The water from Florida. Where does that go? That goes, to Mechlon, which is one of their ritual sacred grounds and sites. And many of these areas, the Dominican Republic, Venezuela, are kind of around those areas. Mexico's got direct lines. We've seen a lot with that, where you had a lot of the Mexican railroads now taking over and having direct access to railroads within our country, meaning that you could have that being used as a thorough way for, movement of children. So I think it's important to pay attention to this. You're getting a lot of, concern of things that I think he's going to be highly connected to system-wise. And I think, we're going to see stuff pretty quick happening with that. And, we understand the extent of just how evil and wicked that's going to be. So, and that's just a map showing the different sugarcane production areas. And look at those darker countries, you just have mass amounts of sugarcane, so that if you think now underground and think mass distribution of, adreno and forms of what they're going to call sugar, that gives you a pretty good picture of where the largest producers of that are.
Isn't it? And I'm just seeing as well, I think it's Nancy Hardwick. Wonder if sugarcane is a reference to slavery. That's exactly what I was thinking as well, especially when you're looking at the Black Panthers and really understanding that the puppet masters are not Black people. They are every other color under the rainbow, I would imagine.
Right.
But do you think that he could be, I don't know, could this be a reference to slavery? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a lot
I think you're going to get that hand in hand with the exploitation. Again, it's going to be overseeing things, but who is he going to be over? And, we saw quite a bit. You've got the fight clubs, you've got the salons, you've got the jewelry, on top of, there's got to be nightclubs or other things connected to the trucks. Are there stations, gas stations he's going to be over? I don't think there's a stop in that. I think that he's just expanding his scope of power and authority, and and then making alliances with someone else who is going to have a very wide range of authority, especially over the areas we mentioned, and beyond. So I think that this is a powerhouse alliance that was just displayed, and I think we'll see more in the next shows this next week.
How interesting. I mean, it's, even though, over there, when we're looking at the Black Panthers again and stuff like that, it's like, to me, again, in such a subtle way, using race, or is it not so subtle? There's always some kind of a divisive factor. But then at the same time, fooling millions of African people into believing that these guys, are maybe their allies. When
Right.
At the end of the day, I mean, we just look at the story of Nelson Mandela, and by now, those of you watching this will know Nelson Mandela, well, not really the Nelson Mandela that went into prison, right? So when we're looking at that and we're seeing how this incredible saint fooled the world, we realize there's nothing saintly about those actions at all. And they will use whichever means available to us so that we can be, just led around by the nose. They want us to feel good and listen to Nelson Mandela talk and have that special voice of his ingrained into our hearts and minds and brains, and his famous way that he always danced when he came onto stage. He was a real African grandpa, Madiba. His name was Madiba. They really made us
Mhm.
love him. I'll tell you that much. The betrayal there is huge.
Yeah.
So not just for South Africans or any Africans, but I think the entire world. And then
Mhm.
we're seeing again how they're using artists of color to push a narrative or make
Mhm.
it feel for people of color that you can do this too, because of course we understand how that whole narrative has played itself out. I'm not going, I'm just talking about this whole, and especially African people, again, they see African American people doing well in the entertainment industry, and boy,
Yeah.
they just want to go to America and be famous and make money. So they have their role models that they use, but meanwhile, to lure them in, and obviously very young and upcoming artists as well, right? And then they are so conned into this manipulation machine. It's crazy, actually.
Mm. So crazy. And I just see look like Nancy put up Jay-Z Rock Nation produced the show, uh, and she said, "I bet Beyonce had input into it." It's very plausible, he'll be connected to them, so
They're still connected, man. And I mean, yeah, I mean, just talking about the Jay-Z thing, I mean, I don't follow them, but of course, all of this stuff is all over everyone's timeline now, I'm sure. And
yeah.
then I saw that Beyonce lost 1 million followers or 10 million followers or something. I don't even know.
When
Because of Jay-Z, who's now in the files. I mean, please, people. Do we
Beyonce's
think
in
that,
there too.
of course,
Notice how
it's, but it,
notice how they're not bringing out the women yet, and I think we'll be
mm,
surprised. That my guess is ratios. We will have far more. I think the ratio is 7 women to every 10 elite men, or sorry, to every 3, elite men there. I think the majority were women.
I, I have a question around that. Now we've been, we've learned a lot about inversions and also inversions taking place in the womb and stuff like that. And a lot of these women are not actually women, but actually are men who
Some.
by nature are less compassionate, empathetic, right? So as a woman, when we give birth to our children or our offspring, we have that amazing connection. We will fight for our kids until death do us part. I will think most mothers would agree with me there.
A normal
And
woman.
that's
But
but that's what I'm
but
saying.
these
Do
are
you not?
women that I mean, you got to think Babylon, think Jezebel, the
Yeah,
princess of Babylon.
yeah, yeah.
You get these women, they rip the children out of their own wombs. That's the truth.
Right.
They rip the children out of their own wombs.
So it's
They,
not so much
yeah,
more. Sorry, it's not so much that a lot of these women we're seeing are having fake pregnancies, right? um, like the upper
they
level.
offer their
Beyonce
children to the
definitely.
gods, and then
Yes,
they take other people's children just so they can look like they have children.
right. And but also a lot of these women, or some, are inverted, so they can't actually
Yes,
give
some
birth.
are. Yeah.
And that's what I'm saying. For that genre, you can't expect that woman to have really the same level of empathy as as a woman, because it's actually born a male by nature, and as a mother you have a different connection to your offspring. That's what I'm saying. So it's kind of
Yeah,
like they're
good
doing
point
that
with
more
that.
and more,
Yeah.
so that there's more mothers who are easily disconnected from their kids, because A, it's
Mhm.
not their real kids, and B, they're not really a woman who's giving birth to begin with.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah, hot topic for sure.
Very hot topic, but you know we like it hot and spicy on here. So
I like
brilliant.
when you get spicy, Shanti.
We always love to get spicy.
Right.
Lovely, Jessie. Thank you. Appreciate you. I don't know. Is there anything else? What did I
No, I think
miss?
that, yeah, I think that was it. And just I encourage people to stay tuned for next week. If you are curious and want to find out more on the decoding of the images of Mary that they use in the Jesuit Catholic Church, I encourage you to sign up for my workshop, The Queen of Heaven, which will be March 12th and 19th. And in there, we're going to get into what the imagery, why do they sometimes show her as the Virgin? Other times you've got little Jesus on the right or the left. Other times you see her with the, veil as the Mother of Sorrows, or, you get different imagery and what does it all represent to them and what are they communicating through it. Again, this isn't, I'm certainly not saying anything bad about Jesus's real mother, Mary, who I do believe is in heaven. I believe she was a woman favored by God and I believe she had a beautiful heart, but we're not talking about her. We're talking how they desecrate her image and what they're communicating through it and what they do when they venerate her. So I encourage you to sign up for that, and I'll go ahead and close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this, and Lord, help us to know what we can do with the information, Lord. Help us to be wise and to be alert to the things that are happening around us, to not just take things at face value, especially when we're kind of getting that feeling we're seeing a lot, we're knowing that there's something being communicated, but we just don't know what, Lord. We ask that you would help us to remember these things, that when we see things, that you would give us that discernment, that wisdom, that knowledge and understanding to know, and the empowerment to be able to do something about it. We ask, Lord, that you would deliver all the children of the nations out with a mighty hand, and we ask that you would do so quickly. We ask that you would bring justice and righteousness, and that your will would be done in these things. In your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie. Great show. Wow, great decode, guys. Like, share, subscribe, get this out there. It's how we keep our algorithms up. And as you all know, we have a little bit of a big brother eye on us. So share, like, subscribe, comment, please. And not just for that reason, but this is really important information that we get out there. And I think the average person, when we understand what they are signaling and what our kids are watching, no matter how naive a mom might, or a dad might be to these things, they would not want that if they understood the truth of that. So let's expose it, keep it real, and absolutely. Hot topics, Desmo. And we're certainly up with some hot topics for the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned, everybody. God bless you all. Thank you. And thank you, Mary. Appreciate your wishes. I will see you tomorrow. Stay tuned. Yeah.